Hey everyone, ever feel like your mind is kind of like, I don't know, a web browser with way too many tabs open at once?
Totally. And we wouldn't think twice about cleaning out a super messy closet, but when it comes to our own minds, it's a whole other story, right?
It really is. So today we're diving into Declutter Your Mind by S.J. Scott and Barrie Davenport. And honestly, this book is amazing. It's like a total breath of fresh air for your brain.
You know what I think is so smart about this book?
What's that?
It really gets why it's so hard to actually declutter our minds. It's not just about forcing ourselves to think positive thoughts all the time. It's about really getting to the root of that mental clutter we all deal with.
So true. It's like you wouldn't try to organize a messy kitchen without figuring out why the heck those dishes keep piling up in the first place, right?
Exactly.
And that's what I love about this book. It breaks down those common culprits,
Yeah.
like everyday stress, decision fatigue, honestly, who hasn't completely frozen in the grocery store, totally overwhelmed by all the choices.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And then on top of that, there's just the sheer volume of stuff, physical stuff that we surround ourselves with.
Yeah, and there's actually some fascinating science behind this. There was this study at Princeton, and they found that visual clutter can actually overload our brains.
Really?
It makes it physically harder to focus. Think of it this way. Your brain is running a marathon just trying to process your messy desk.
Oh, wow. I'm already feeling stressed just thinking about it.
Right, so it's no wonder we feel so scattered and overwhelmed.
It's true. You know what really drove this home for me in the book? It was when they talked about Dan Harris, the news anchor from ABC News.
Oh yeah, what about him?
So he had this like full-blown panic attack
Hmm.
on live TV.
Oh no.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And it was all because of the insane amount of stress he was carrying around. Talk about a wake-up call.
It really shows you how those external factors, the stress, the choices, the clutter, they really do affect us on a neurological level.
Right. It's not just in our heads. It's literally changing the way our brains work.
Ex-
Okay, so knowing why our minds feel like a junk drawer is one thing. But how do we actually start decluttering? Because this stuff doesn't magically disappear on its own, right?
Well, you might be surprised to hear that the book starts with something surprisingly simple.
Oh, like what?
Focused, deep breathing and meditation.
Okay, so I know what you're thinking, right? Deep breathing, meditation, isn't that a little...
Woo-woo.
It might sound that way. But here's where it gets interesting.
I mean, the book doesn't just throw these practices out there, some trendy wellness thing. It actually connects them back to real scientific research.
Okay, so there's some actual science behind this whole deep breathing meditation thing.
Yeah, there's a lot, actually. For example, there's this Harvard cardiologist, Dr. Herbert Benson,
Okay.
and he found that these practices, especially deep rhythmic breathing, they can actually trigger a real physiological shift in our bodies.
Get out. So it's
Uh,
not just about feeling calm for a few minutes. It's actually changing how our brains function.
Yeah, totally. There are studies that show that meditation can lead to some pretty amazing benefits, things like way better focus and even, get this, a thicker cortex.
A thicker what now?
Cortex. It's the part of our brain that's responsible for all that higher level thinking stuff.
Okay, thicker cortex. Got it. Sign me up. Speaking of, didn't the book have a meditation guide or something?
Totally, yeah. They have this super simple 10-minute guide.
2 minutes, I can do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the best part is you don't have to become a meditation master or anything. Even just a few minutes a day, consistently, that can make a world of difference.
Seriously, even just carving out those few minutes for yourself, just to breathe and
Mhm.
be present, that's huge.
It really is. It's all about building that mindfulness muscle, one deep breath at a time, right?
Right. So even with all the breathing and meditation, those negative thoughts, they can still kind of sneak in there sometimes.
Yeah. Tell
Right.
me about it. It's they just love to hang out in our heads rent free.
It's like that song you can't stand, but it's stuck on repeat in your brain. So how do we finally evict those bad vibes? What does the book say?
Well, the book dives into some seriously practical ways to disentangle yourself from those negative thought patterns. And one of the most powerful techniques is honestly super simple.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What is it?
Basically, you just observe your thoughts, but without any judgment.
So instead of getting totally sucked into that whole I'm not good enough spiral, it's more like, huh, look at that. That thought's back again.
Exactly. You're creating this space, this distance between you and the thought itself,
Interesting.
which then helps you detach from the power it has over you.
That's kind of brilliant when you think about it. It's like wearing, I don't know, mental sunglasses or something.
Love that.
Takes the sting out of those negative thoughts. But are we just fighting our own brains at that point?
That's a great question. And actually, the book talks about how some of our negative thinking is like hardwired into our brains.
Wait, really? So I'm like doomed to overthink things from birth.
Not necessarily, thankfully. Like a lot of it is thanks to evolution, right?
Oh, thanks. Evolution. Real helpful.
Right. But the good news is that doesn't mean we're stuck with it. We can actually train our brains to react differently.
Okay, that's good to hear. So we're not defined by every little gloomy thought that pops up.
Definitely not.
So what's the bigger picture here? Like, beyond tackling those individual thoughts, what else can we do to, like, really declutter our minds? What else does this book recommend?
One of the biggest things they talk about is living intentionally.
Living intentionally. What does that even mean?
It means like figuring out what your core values are and what your priorities are.
Yeah, well, I'm listening.
And then using those to guide your decisions and just generally how you live your life, you know.
Okay, so less going with the flow, more like charting your own course. You know, it's interesting. The book mentions how, like, our grandparents' generation, they didn't have a million choices for everything. Like, back then, it was just coffee.
Yeah.
You know? Now it's like cold brew, nitro-infused, oat latte, what even?
Right. And don't even get me started on all the milk options. Almond, oat, soy, cashew. It's like a whole thing.
It's too much. It really is, though.
Yeah.
So they just focused on the things that really mattered, like family, community, faith.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why they seem so, I don't know, grounded.
I think you're onto something. The book talks about that, the paradox of choice, you know?
Right. The more options we have, the more scattered and less satisfied we often feel.
Exactly.
So how do we figure out what actually matters in the midst of all the noise?
Well, the book has this awesome exercise for this, for like actually defining your own core values.
Oh, tell me more.
Basically, it helps you get clear on like what truly matters to you, and then you use those values like almost as a compass, right?
Oh, that's cool.
Cool.
So it's like instead of just feeling pulled in every direction, you're like, nope, this is what I'm about. This is my path.
That's a great way to put it.
All right, so we've got breathing, meditating, busting those pesky negative thoughts, figuring out our core values. Is there anything else we need for, like, the ultimate mental declutter? What else does the book say?
Oh, yeah. There's more. They also dive into this whole concept of mindful goal setting.
Mindful goal setting. Is that like the opposite of frantically trying to hit every deadline?
Pretty much. It's not just about achieving stuff. It's more about like using the process of setting and working towards goals as a way to create more peace of mind.
I like the sound of that. It's
Mm.
more about enjoying the journey, not just stressing about the destination, right?
Totally. And speaking of enjoying the journey, the book actually talks about setting what they call S.M.A.R.T goals. Have you ever heard of that?
Vaguely. Remind me what that stands for again.
So S.M.A.R.T stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound.
Oh, right. It's like a whole system.
Right. And it's a great way to like break down those big kind of scary goals into smaller steps that feel much more doable.
That makes sense because, like, who wants a goal that's so big and overwhelming it just stresses you out even more?
Exactly. And here's another key point they make. It's crucial to like connect your goals back to those passions we were talking about earlier, you know?
Oh, yeah. So it's like, why even bother setting a goal if you don't actually care about it?
Exactly. That's what makes them meaningful.
All right, so we've talked about decluttering our thoughts, our goals, and ready for this. This book even tackles a less obvious source of mental clutter:
Oh, and what's that?
relationships.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That makes sense, though, doesn't it?
It does. But it's not like we can just declutter people from our lives, right?
Well, not exactly.
So how does that work?
Well, it starts with recognizing that while relationships are like essential for our well-being, you know, they can also be a huge source of stress and anxiety if we're not careful.
No, 100%.
Hmm.
It can be tough to navigate all the different personalities and stuff.
Totally. And so it's really about like the quality of those connections, not just how many people you have in your life.
Well, that's so true. It's like that saying, you can have a million acquaintances, but true friends, those are the ones who are there for you no matter what.
Exactly.
So what does the book suggest for, like, decluttering those relationships?
Yeah.
Is it even possible?
Well, they offer some really cool mindful relationship strategies.
The mindful relationship strategies, huh? All right, tell me more.
Okay, so one of the big ones is this thing called empathic listening.
Empathic listening. Okay. I think I've heard of that. What is that again?
So it's all about like really truly tuning into what the other person is saying and how they're feeling without letting your own thoughts and opinions, get in the way.
So basically, no interrupting with my side of the story before they're even finished.
It's tougher than it sounds.
Yeah,
But yeah, the book talks about how powerful it can be to just really listen and validate the other person's experience.
I could see that. Like, sometimes just feeling heard is all it takes to, like, really diffuse the situation, right?
Totally.
Okay, so we've got empathic listening. What else?
Oh, and then there's mindful speaking. Have you heard of that one?
Mindful speaking. So, like, thinking before you speak.
Exactly, which, let's be honest, can be really hard in the heat of the moment. Right?
Oh, tell me about it. I know what you mean.
It's about choosing your words carefully to avoid, like, unnecessary conflict and misunderstandings.
That makes sense. Like, I know I've definitely said things in the past that I wish I could take back. You know?
Oh, same. But that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
It's about trying to be more mindful.
Totally.
Because even a small shift in how we communicate can totally change a relationship for the better.
Oh, it's so true. Sometimes all it takes is a well-placed, you know what, you're right. I didn't think of it that way.
Right. See? You get it.
Okay, so we've got empathic listening, mindful speaking. What else?
Well, get this. They even talk about something called loving kindness meditation.
Loving kindness meditation. Okay, now you've got my attention. Tell me everything.
Okay, so basically it's this specific type of meditation, and it's all about like cultivating feelings of warmth, compassion, and kindness towards, well, everyone, really.
Okay, so if I'm picturing like my super annoying coworker while I'm doing this loving kindness meditation, am I doing it right?
I know, right? It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but hear me out, because there's actually a lot of research on this.
Okay, I'm listening.
Studies show that practicing this type of meditation can actually make you feel more connected to others and even, like, reduce how much hostility you feel towards, those difficult people in your life.
Really? Wow. That's pretty powerful.
It really is. It's about shifting your perspective.
So we've tackled decluttering our thoughts, our goals, our relationships. Is there, like, any part of our lives this book doesn't try to tidy up? Seriously, though, it's like this wants to help us Marie Kondo our entire lives, which actually makes total sense when you think about it. Because we started off by talking about how all that physical clutter can really overload our brains.
That's true.
So it makes sense that they bring it back around to, simplifying our actual physical surroundings, too.
Totally. That's such a key part of this whole decluttering thing.
So besides just, shoving stuff in drawers when people come over,
Oh, you know me so well.
what does the book actually recommend? What are some of the tips?
Well, they actually dedicate a good chunk to decluttering our homes. They even suggest, like, a 10-minute-a-day kind of routine.
Okay, I can get behind that. 10 minutes, I can handle that.
Right. Just set a timer and tackle, like, one small area.
Love it.
And, they also talk about Marie Kondo's philosophy of, like, only keeping the things that spark joy.
Oh, yeah. I love that. Letting go of all that stuff that's just taking up space,
Yeah.
both physically and mentally.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the physical stuff. But what about our digital lives? Because honestly, I feel like that's where I have the most clutter these days.
Oh, 100%. Like our phones, our computers, all of it.
All of it.
Yeah, and the book has some great tips for that, too.
Okay, good. Because I need all the help I can get.
So, like, one of the things they talk about is, like, setting boundaries around how much you're using technology,
Oh, interesting. Okay, so like setting some limits.
Yeah, like maybe you have, like, certain times of the day that are device-free.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Oh,
I like that. It's like a mini digital detox.
Exactly. Just to give your mind a break.
And speaking of detox, I feel like the book also talked about like being more mindful of our schedules too.
Right. They did. That's another really big one. It's all about really figuring out what matters most to you and then being okay with, like, saying no to the things that don't.
Oh, the dreaded no word.
Yeah.
I am so bad at saying no.
It's tough. But honestly, it's one of the best things you can do for yourself.
Easier said than done, but yeah, I know you're right. Because it's so easy to get caught up in trying to please everyone,
Oh, totally. But remember, saying yes to everything, that's the opposite of decluttering.
It's so right.
It's about making space for the things and the people that truly light you up.
Okay, love that. This has been eye-opening. So as we're wrapping up here, what was your biggest takeaway from Declutter Your Mind? Like, what really stuck with you?
For me, it was that idea that decluttering, it's not about like creating some perfectly empty minimalist life,
Yeah.
you know? It's about being really intentional about what you choose to fill your life with.
Oh, I love that. So it's not just about getting rid of things. It's about really thinking about what you're saying yes to.
Exactly. What brings you joy? What gives you a sense of purpose?
Ooh, good questions. Lots to think about.
Yeah.
And if you want even more practical tips and insights, honestly,